Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. This is your ultimate guide to Marathon, covering everything you need to know, from the different runner shells to the different factions, the loot in the game and how to get the best kinds, the different maps and the objectives on those maps, and everything in between. It's all covered in this video. So let's start off with the different shells. The first is Destroyer, and this is what you're going to be put on during the game's tutorial. It's kind of a tank character with a massive shield that you can pull up, and you can also activate homing missiles that will fire when you are shooting at a target for any extended period of time. You can also boost in your movement direction, and this is a massive ability to have. It makes a huge difference and is really slept on, I think, by newer players who don't realize that kind of dodge can absolutely make or break a fight. The next is Vandal, who you'll probably hear a lot of people calling Glitch because of renaming that happened during the game's alpha. Vandal is a mobility character and can double jump, slide super far, and can also amplify her movement speed via her prime ability. Vandal also has a concussive blast, which you can use to knock people out of cover, you can push people off ledges, and you can just generally be a nuisance. That's Vandal. Next is Recon. This is another one that you might hear people calling Blackbird because of the old name for the character. This is kind of a support character, but really it's like a reconnaissance character. I mean, it's in the name, right? You can reveal hostile locations with a pulse effect, and you also have a tracker drone spider robot thing, which will seek targets and blow up. And the tracker drone tracking can be a little funky at times, so sometimes you'll see it sort of scuttling around a room in circles, not knowing where the enemies are, but other times it can be really effective, and it will then do tick damage over time as well once it hits them. Next is Assassin. This is another one that was renamed. Some people will call this Ghost. This is sort of a solo character, I think. Its entire kit really revolves around smoke. You've got this ground slam that creates smoke. Your prime ability creates a big smoke sphere, and you can go invisible and become smoke, I guess. So if you really want to rat, then Assassin might be the character for you. Next is Triage, the healer. This wasn't available in the alpha or the server slam, but is available in the main game. Triage can instantly revive teammates using a kind of Emperor Palpatine Force Lightning type thing, except it fires ropes out of your hands. And that's a revive when teammates are downed or when they're full dead as well, which is pretty damn powerful. Triage also has healing drones that you can throw out to your teammates, or you can just throw onto yourself, and you can continuously replenish those, and can boost your weapon performance with your ability here, which also adds an EMP effect to your vault weapons as well. Next is Thief. This is the thief character of the game. No surprises there. You've got a grapple for movement, and this works kind of like your strand grapple in Destiny 2. You've also got a remote control drone that can steal loot from people, but is also great for reconnaissance and understanding who's in a given area and tracking people down when they're trying to run away. And you can also see valuable loot in containers, which means that if you're trying to steal all the good loot from your teammates, Thief is the pick. And next is Rook. This is the scav character, completely different from the other runners. Rook has his own inventory, so he can't use anything from the vault. You just load in with Rook and you get what Rook has. You can't complete faction contracts with Rook, which we'll talk about later. You can only join games in progress. You have a blend in with UESC ability that means that the UESC bots don't see you, and a self-repair ability. And this means that Rook essentially acts as this game's Tarkov scav run. Next, let's talk gear, mod slots, backpacks, all those sorts of things. The game has a variety of loot rarities, going from grey, standard loot, up to green, enhanced, blue, deluxe, purple, superior, and finally gold or prestige loot. You'll get greys and greens very easily. Blues will take maybe a couple of hours of playtime to get consistent across all of the different slots in your backpack. And then purples are pretty damn rare and hard to come by, and golds are very prestigious, as the name suggests, and will only be found from the hardest activities in the game, and from some of the rarest opportunities to find loot, such as from locked rooms that require keycards to access. Now that said, don't be discouraged if you're using a grey weapon, because that's still completely fine. It's not the base weapon itself that has a rarity in this game, it's the attachments you put on the weapon. So if you've got something grey and you whack on a chip mod that's purple, and you whack on a sight, and you whack on a barrel and things like that, very quickly, its rarity is going to upgrade and it's going to be a higher rarity weapon. It's just reflective of what those mods are. You can enter the mod screen by hovering the weapon and selecting Inspect/Modify, and that's where you'll be able to see your stats as well. And the nice thing about this screen is it automatically shows you the mods in your vault that can be applied to that weapon. There are lots of different weapon types in the game. Some of them are going to take light ammo, that's this green ammo here. There's also this grey ammo, which is heavy ammo. Then there's vault cells, and these work slightly differently because with these, if you're shooting your gun and you've used 10% of your magazine and you reload, normally with a regular gun, you just use up the 10 bullets from your reserves that you need to fill your clip. But with vault cells, you waste the entire remains of the cell when you reload. So you're always ideally going to want to burn the magazine to 0 before you move on to the next vault cell. You then also have snipers and shotguns and those sorts of weapons that have MIPS rounds, and these are a little bit more expensive to replenish, but that's because you're using a weapon that has a lot more kill potential, and so those MIP rounds are a little bit more valuable. Next, let's talk shields. So you'll start off and you'll just have grey shield, and that's one block of shield, but very quickly you'll start getting green shields. And this is going to be your sort of baseline as you play the game, and then obviously you have higher rarity shields as well, but beware, some of these lower rarity shields actually have negative stats, so they might lower your heat capacity, and the heat system is something we'll talk about in just a second, or they may reduce your agility, which is self-explanatory. Now, if you get some higher rarity shields, they'll give you higher numbers of plates, and you can find some shields that have special attributes like reinforced as well, which make your shields take half damage. But if your shield does take damage, you can just replenish it using a shield charge, or you can use Triage's healing bot. In equipment, your grenade slot has lots of different things that can fill it in this game. You can actually use ammo crates in your equipment slot, and those can be very useful if you want to load in with a bit more ammo, but you can't quite fit it all in your inventory. You can just bring in an ammo crate. Alongside those, you've got claymores, you've got EMPs, which are going to disable enemies' tactical abilities. You've got frags, you've got smokes, which are going to be really helpful for your assassin characters. You've got bubble shields as well. You've got chem grenades. There's all kinds of equipment in this game. Next are cores. These customize your build in a really big way, and as you get higher rarity cores, they become character or class specific. So for instance, one core I've been using for triage allows me to heal my squad's status effects with a healing bot. So when I throw the bot out at them, it doesn't just give them slow health, but if they're suffering from some kind of other effect, I don't have to pop a different kind of consumable to help heal them, but instead it just happens passively. You can have 2 cores equipped at a time, and these are massive game changers. Like, you should really play around these things in a big way. They're incredibly powerful, even at low rarities. Finally, for this section, there's implants, and these might seem a little confusing at first, but there's 3 types of implants. You've got head, torso, and legs, and these give or take character stats and grant additional abilities as well. Also really worth paying attention to. So I mentioned we'd come back to the heat system, right? This is basically this game's version of a stamina bar, where when you sprint, your heat meter will go up, and if you overheat your sprint meter by getting it to full, you'll then not be able to sprint for a few seconds while the bar cools all the way down to 0. Now, there are various things that you can do to make sure that you either don't hit max heat in the first place, or you cool down from max heat very quickly once you do, and those are the following. You can stand in water in this game, and that will give you a little indicator on your screen saying that your heat buildup is reduced. This also applies if you're standing in rain. Your heat meter will be reduced. Similarly, if you slow down, so if you're sprinting and you slow down to a walk, your heat will reduce faster. And if you go one step further and you crouch, that will give you the fastest possible heat reduction. You've also got things like the skill trees in the game that can mean that your heat buildup is slower and things like that. So if it feels sluggish when you first start playing, don't worry, it will get better. You won't have as much of a problem with heat in the future. Next, let's talk bots. These are the bad guys that you're going to be fighting a lot of the time in Perimeter and Dire Marsh when you first start playing the game. These start out at the basic UESC bot level. Then you get grenadiers that do exactly what you think. They grenade you and they do tons of damage, so you really want to respect these guys if you see them. There are ghosts that can go invisible and are very annoying, and there are also assault bots with shields like the Destroyer class. Each bot has a commander version, which makes them more difficult, but their rewards are better, so they are really worth taking down. They usually have purple shields though, so be wary. There are also things like tick nests around the map, which don't really count as an enemy, I think. It's kind of a passive thing in the world that's annoying. So maybe we'll put these in the category of traps. They'll scuttle over to you and explode and deal damage. You can just knife them to get rid of them, and then you can destroy their little nest and they'll stop spawning. There are also turrets all over the place that will shoot you if you enter their cone of vision. There are toxic plants that if you go near them, they'll pop and give you tox damage. And these are very annoying, but they can be countered pretty well with Triage's bots. And there are also things like claymores all over the place that you need to look out for. There are security barricades inside buildings, and if you walk into them, you get hacked. There's lots of environmental things to avoid in this game. But thankfully, there are lots of consumables in the game which help you evade and avoid some of those annoying status effects. So, we'll go through these one by one, but it's going to be quite a lot of information overload, so feel free to come back to this point in the video in the future or timestamp it for yourself in the comments section. And while you're down there, maybe just leave a comment letting me know if I'm doing a good job on this video. I'm just getting into making marathon content, and I'd love to hear if you're enjoying it so far. So, the mechanics kit. This is the red pack that will be in the top left corner of your consumables wheel. This will remove physical and environmental debuffs like toxin from the plants. Then you've got the blue OS debug pack, which fixes any hacks or EMP attacks that you're suffering from. The green antivirus pack in the bottom right is a preemptive buff for future hacks that you may suffer from, and you'll use this to do the lockdowns in Dire Marsh, which we might talk about later. Cardio kick. This increases your agility and heat capacity. It's in the bottom left. And so if you need to sprint across the map at the very end of the game before the final exfil, then having a cardio kick will really, really help you for that. There's signal jammers, which are the red packs. These make you scrambled, so it almost looks like you're in a live leak or something. It's much harder to see you because you're just sort of in a cloud of pixelation, and it will also hide you from radar pulses. You've got self-revives, these little yellow packs, and when these are in your inventory, you have the option to use these to self-res. No explainer needed there. Energy amps are pretty slept on. These give you tactical and prime ability charge. So if you've just ulted and you pop some amps, you can get it back super quickly. And then you've got these purple rarity Pangea kits, which restore health, shields, and remove debuffs. These things are very, very powerful. Now, if you're in a pinch and you just can't remember what to use in a given moment, if you open the radial menu for your consumables and you go down, you'll see Smart Heal, and that will choose the best item for you to use. It obviously won't be perfect, but it does remove thinking if you just need to quickly have the game make a decision for you. Next, let's talk factions and contracts. The first faction you'll unlock is Syac, and you'll be given a task to do for Syac, which will give you Syac faction XP. Now, running contracts with friends grants you a third of their faction XP as well, so it's definitely beneficial to play in a squad, and ranking a faction up gives you rewards and unlocks more tiers of the skill tree for you to purchase, and each faction has their own skill tree with their own unique benefits. The skill tiers cost materials and credits, or sometimes one or the other, and it's by doing those Syac contracts at the beginning that will introduce you to these liaison contracts that open up the other factions. Now, in terms of what to level first, I think leveling Syac a decent amount first is pretty good because it's got a bunch of really nice upgrades, including things like increased loot speed and increased heat capacity. Another reason to upgrade factions as well is to unlock more of their trades and barters in the armory, allowing you to buy really good gear. And you've also got capstone upgrades at the bottom of each faction's skill tree, and These will unlock things like some rook upgrades alongside some other goodies for the faction. Next, sponsor kits. So what happens when you die? Well, you can just pop a sponsor kit from one of those factions and they'll give you some free stuff associated with the faction for you to use in your next run. They'll always be fairly basic loadouts, but it just gets you back going from zero, so they're really worth using. And there's additional kits for purchase on a daily rotation in the armory, but you can get a bunch for free as well. So that's what happens if you die. But what happens when you live? Right? You're at the end of a game, then what? Well, obviously it's an extraction shooter, we're gonna extract. There are a few things to be aware of. Extraction points will appear on the map after 5 minutes of a match start, and some extract points are guarded with this little icon, whereas others are just open to use. Regardless of which you call in, you're going to need to call it and then wait for the exfil to become active, and you'll see the little pylon charging up while this happens. Then when it is active, you'll see that you can walk into it and it will start a 10-second timer, and once that timer ends, you'll be extracted. Now, if you're downed while you're in that little timer area, you'll still extract so long as you're within the circle radius, and you won't lose your loot. However, if you're full dead, then you will lose your loot, and that's bad news bears. Now, if you miss all of the extracts on the map, there'll be one final exfil at the very end, and you'll just be forced to sprint over to it like crazy, and this is always a bit sketchy to rely on, but it is there in a pinch. As you go through the game, you'll notice that there are more exfils that will pop up, because if an enemy team uses an exfil, then it gets used up, and you need to go somewhere else. So let's talk a little bit more about loot now, because there's a whole sort of meta of figuring out how to loot in this game. The UI takes a bit of time to get used to. First off, obviously, if it's rare, it's probably worth grabbing, especially if it's rare relative to your current loadout or vault. But you should also pay attention to things that have a high credit value. Alongside that, there are also some core items that are used for a ton of the different faction skill trees. So if you see gunmetal, for example, I think these are always worth extracting with. The little purple diodes, always worth extracting with. The little brown poop bags, exact same thing. Like, it's worth keeping an eye on what's going to be used in your faction upgrade trees and just stacking a ton of those in one single slot in your backpack and making sure that you can exfil with them. And if you don't know where to find a given piece of loot, you can hover over it and it will tell you its source locations. Now, the really good loot is going to be from doing activities. So the first map you play on is Perimeter, but there are 4 maps in the game. There's Perimeter at base, Diamarsh, which is a little bit more PvP heavy, Outpost, which is even more of a meat grinder, and then Cryo, which is kind of the end game puzzle map. In each of these maps, there are different objectives. So Lockdown is an activity that I mentioned earlier, present in Dire Marsh, where you need an antivirus pack, then you go into the lockdown, you grab a key, you use it to disable the virus field, then you call in some UESC bots, you take out 3 waves, you get a bunch of loot, and you can do that 3 times in a game. But each map has its own activities, and each of them will have really good loot. There are also some things that are common across multiple maps. So cache locations, for example, where you get coordinate data pads and they then give you the location of a cache, and when you get there, there'll be a bunch of bags that you can open and will have decent loot inside. You also get keys, like I mentioned earlier, and these open up locked rooms that give you really good loot, especially if they're blue or above keys. There are random events that will show up with a question mark on the map, and these will be things like little supply drops or tox clear rooms where you need a hazard override key to get rid of the gas in a room and you can loot the good stuff that's inside. There are flying drones with crates. These can be shot down and these are going to give you goodies as well. And there are also little wall safes that you can hack and boxes that you can set alarms off on to call in enemies, and then once you kill all the enemies, you'll get rewards from the box. Like, there's all sorts of little objectives you can do for better loot in this game. Or you can just kill other players, steal their loot, and exfil with it. In terms of the kind of game lobby types, you can queue into a match with 3 people in your party, or you can queue with fewer, but you can squad fill to also be in a squad of 3 when you spawn in. That will mostly match you with other 3s, but you can have rooks obviously entering your game. But if you want to queue with fewer people, you can do that too. So if you queue solo without squad fill on, then you'll mostly get matched against other solos, but again, you may have to watch out for rooks as well, and Bungie's also considering doing the same thing for duos. Now, I've got a ton of other videos going up on my channel for Marathon, so I really recommend you subscribe at this point if this has been a useful video. And on screen now, I've got some links to some of my other Marathon content for you to click through to. I'm sure they'll be helpful for you, so click on over and I'll see you there.